Good morning. How are you?
That does sound like it. No,
Say, I don't see who they recommended on this little sheet that I have.
It was endpoint. Well, I'm just, for our conversation,
Yeah, okay.
so it was endpoint. That's what I was just talking about. We're going to keep it with 3 because that's what we said on the menu. Yes, 1, 2, and 3, and then we'll go in the middle. Yeah, rankings of it as a whole. That and the amount we should talk about. Like the amount to go after.
Did you have enough information this time to?
I mean,
I mean, there was one. The last one's easy. They said they didn't want to do it. They're a big firm. They do a lot of different things. But all right, looks like I'm already. All right, good morning, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and get the meeting started, so I'll hit the gavel here and we'll get going. First off, I want to go ahead and call to order and do roll call.
Bill Emlin,
Here?
John Jansen,
Here.
Joshua Shadwick,
Here.
Caesar Javaharian, Greg Folsom,
Here.
Thea Gibbity,
Here.
David Piscinati.
Here.
Okay, we have a quorum present.
All right, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and do a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, I know before we get started, Ben, I think you had a comment before we do approval of the agenda.
Yes, I motion to remove Citygate Associates due to their unavailability to meet our timeline.
All right, thanks, Ben. Okay, so that helps us in terms of our process we'll be going through this morning. Items from the public. So if anybody has any comments for the group here that's not on the agenda today, this is your opportunity to make those comments. Seeing no one, then we will go on to regular calendar, and it's basically a review and consider a designation of a consultant from the provided vendor list on attachment 5A to create the exclusive operating area request for request for proposal board to choose top
2 or 3 choices, I think, Ben, you'll clarify that, and then in order of preference.
Yes, we're going to stick with selecting of 3 and a ranking 1, 2, 3.
So I know this was an item that we had on our last agenda. I know that the committee wanted to look further at, get some further information. I'm hopeful that the information that's been provided in the packet is what you were looking for. And Ben, I don't know if you want to do any kind of presentation as we get started here?
No, I wanted to make sure just to provide the information and then let the board make their decision on the information given.
Okay, all right. So let's go ahead and open it up to the group. We have 4 choices this morning, and we want to rank them, and basically top 2 or 3 would be, I think, what would help go on to the next phase of the process, which is for RFP. Hi, Greg.
Good morning. I just have a question for you, Ben. How were these responses solicited? I'm trying to, was there an RFP? Was it just kind of a verbal request? And I'm asking that because normally when I see proposals like this, I like to see what was asked so I can tell if they were like responsive, if they answered everything that was requested of them.
No, it was just a selection of vendors that are able to do RFPs for an ambulance contract. The means of how I got these lists were from past administrations, from transport agencies, MSAC, my community with MSAC, reaching out to local other administrators to see who actually just performed RFPs with them. It's a very selected group and a unique group that does these. So it was very hard to kind of find them online or any other research. So that's how I got them. Pretty much word of mouth and references from those.
Okay, so fairly informal then. They didn't have something they were specifically, we want to see this, 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 and this in your proposal?
No.
Okay.
I think basically what you have is those questions that they answered on the first page, and that's part of with the background information they provided.
Yes. The 5 questions, the team and I, we kind of put something together to give opportunity for each vendor to try to give you guys the most information in this process.
So I will open it up to the group and ask how you want to handle this in terms of how we go through the selection process. I mean, I have my ideas about who I think we would take further into the process, but I'd like to hear from everybody.
Where you want to start? We'll follow right behind you.
Yeah, I mean, when I reviewed it, I mean, the 2 that I saw right off was one was Endpoint EMS Consulting, and healthcare strategists seem to do a fairly comprehensive job in their proposal. So those are the 2 that I kind of identified right off the bat. Citygate, it was an easy choice because they kind of just said no. Filler security strategies, they had some local connection. Their experience level seems to be less, so I've kind of opened it up to other folks if they have any other perspectives on that. And then let's see, Fitch Associates is a big firm, it looks like to me, and does a lot of national stuff. I didn't have them as my top 2, so those are my comments. So I'm interested to hear from the rest of the committee.
I'll just follow up, I guess. That was kind of why I was asking the question, because both Endpoint and healthcare strategists seem to provide a real, I assumed it was a fairly complete response and a lot more detail. They explained their project team. One of them was Northern California centered. I like that. Fitch seemed very off the shelf and generic, but maybe they weren't asked for more. And then Filler also didn't have a lot of detail, but they did seem to have a couple team members that had local knowledge. So those kind of stood out, I guess.
I had a slightly different perspective. So Fitch, I agree, seems large and does a lot of national things. I did think that they outlined the process they would use well. So I had a very clear picture as what the phases would be and who they would engage and how they would go about doing that. So it's clear to me they have a lot of experience in doing that. With Endpoint, I was also pleased with what they provided and also had a pretty clear sense of what their process would be. 2 things jumped out at me with Endpoint. One was in just the basic sheet of questions that they were asked around whether or not they could meet the timeline. They said, most likely, depends on how involved the stakeholders are, made me question their ability to sort of drive a stakeholder process, both effectively in terms of input, but then also timely in terms of what the timeline requires of the process. And so that jumped out at me. Also on Endpoint, when I read through the individuals, there's one individual, John Eaglesham, that makes me question whether or not there's a bit of a conflict of interest with this company and his role with the California Ambulance Association. So that's also just a question in my mind. And then the healthcare strategist, I agree. I liked what I saw there. I felt like, though, they didn't really outline a process. They provided what they did with Santa Cruz, but they didn't really talk about what they would do for us and what their process might look like. But it's clear from their Santa Cruz work that they're experienced in this, and so I ranked them highly as well, but didn't feel like I got a sense of what their process with us would be. Thank you.
Others want to jump in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Well, actually, before I get started, I want to, I guess, maybe apologize if I created a whole nother meeting and a whole nother morning wasted for you guys, but I just felt like it was super important based on what happened last time, and I appreciate, everyone up here for putting the time in on this, because it is an important to get the right group. So just start with that. As far as who we're left with, I did a little bit of digging around on all of them, and I think there's something to be said that maybe just having experience, the names of places that they've done these for is not prove that they're good if the processes were really bad. And it sounds to me like Fitch and Associates had some real struggles with their Santa Barbara contract recently, to the point where it's my understanding that it got thrown out. And then similarly with Endpoint, they both have had some really struggles. Endpoint in Sonoma County had some real struggles with their process, and I'm very concerned about both of them. Healthcare strategies, they seem dialed, and they were definitely in my top two, and also they were a little more local. And then obviously Filler was very local, and people that are very familiar with the system. And I think, again, going back to what happened 5 years ago, maybe a huge firm from out of the area isn't the best fit for us, and maybe something with some more local knowledge might be better. So I really had Filler and Healthcare at my 1 and 2, and Endpoint and Fitch below, based on what I know that their work product has been lately.
Okay, other input from the committee?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I have healthcare strategists as my top one, and what I liked is that they didn't have any direct contracts with either private ambulance companies or with fire departments, if I read that right. They just do business with governmental agencies, right? And so that kind of may take away some of the potential conflicts of interest, if there's any there. I had the same concern with both Fitch, what happened in Santa Barbara, and then Endpoint. Sonoma, I heard some things from, but I mostly got concerns about San Bernardino contract that would happen down there. I don't envy these companies anyways. These processes aren't really the funnest to begin with, right? So maybe not take them out of the loop altogether. And Filler Security, it does have some local names which could be good, but it also might be a hindrance depending on track records and history and experience of those folks. So I had healthcare strategists as number 1, and then I did have Filler number 2 is what I had.
My main issue with Filler, though, was just that they had no completed RFPs. So it's just the lack of completion of a project. That was my main thing. Otherwise, I like the local aspect of it, because otherwise I had healthcare as number 1 as well. But then I ended up doing with Endpoint number 2 just purely because Filler hadn't completed anything before. That was my only concern.
Can someone talk more about the issue with Endpoint? I'd like to hear more about that.
Are you talking about their recent?
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to I mean, it would just be more rumors than anything, but I know that they did have some issues up there. But from what I gather, that they're back in contract with Sonoma, trying to fix something. But I would have to get a little bit more time on that to get you the real information. No, Bill.
Hi, Bill Matash, Health Officer. I think it's helpful to keep in mind what it is that we're asking for relative to some of these other counties. What we're asking of this vendor is to develop an RFP that will address the concerns of our community and to get optimum stakeholder input. They will not be selecting the client through the RFP. Sonoma doesn't have an SEMSC JPA for its LEMSA, it's a board of supervisors. Sonoma has had more health officers than I've owned shirts because they are such an intrusive board of supervisors. They micromanage, and it would not surprise me that they micromanage this process as well. And so I think that they were unhappy with it, but I wouldn't take away from that the vendor wouldn't provide adequate service to us. I don't know what happened in the San Bernardino situation, so I apologize. I didn't even know that there was a problem. But the purpose of hiring this vendor is to construct the RFP, which we will then, as county agency, put out. So, at that point, how we select is going to be up to your board. You're going to give us input. You will identify or help us to identify the individuals that will review the RFPs, the vendors, et cetera. And so I think that the discrete role may be beneficial for us to all be aware of so that we don't necessarily draw conclusions from situations where they were handled differently.
Dr. Matthias, one quick question on that. When I look at some of the responses we got, they do talk about a comprehensive EMS study. I'm assuming that is part of this?
Yes. But they need to know what our county's needs are, right? If you're going to do an RFP, what is it that you're issuing the RFP for? Well, we're issuing it for ambulance services, 911 services for our EOA, which means we're not covering Vacaville, but we're covering the rest of the county. It has to be comprehensive. It has to cover the entire territory. There has to be guidelines provided for responsiveness. There has to be the ability to operate under EMD and BAI. I mean, they have to do the things that we consider necessary for ambulance services. And those aren't the same from county to county. I mean, they are going to vary somewhat. We are pretty aggressive in terms of what we expect of our EMS providers because we have, over the past decade, amplified the skill set and the abilities of our providers to serve our community, right? We have interfaces with our trauma centers and with our hospitals that are different than some of the other EMS agencies do in other counties. And so they have to meet our particular needs, and that's going to be embedded in the RFP, so that a vendor applying will know what we're expecting of them. And I should also note that, just for the sake of transparency, that we do also have in parallel a process by which we may see the formation of a JPA that is a public fire entity that could be the service provider for 911 as well. And if that comes to fruition in a timely manner, then your board is going to have a different decision to make.
Okay. I don't know if we've heard I don't think we've heard from, do you have any additional input on?
Well, I think we're kind of recruiting ourselves from like this part of the, oh, sorry. There's only a few of us. I think, from our standpoint, at least from my standpoint as a medical director, recused myself from this decision process to make it as objective as possible because, honestly, if you look through this list, a lot of those people are our colleagues, like in MDAC and things like that. Those are their subject matter experts. And so I personally have not taken part in the choosing of these vendors or in the ranking of their suitability.
Okay, appreciate that. Joshua.
I was just thinking, after hearing from everyone, it seems like we possibly could have a number one. Maybe we vote and come up with a number one first, and then we can talk about.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I think we have pretty good consensus on the one.
Do
So
you need a motion to do that?
yeah,
or?
let's go ahead and make a motion.
I'll make a motion that we'll go number one, healthcare strategies. And I'll just also start that off with saying my number one was filler, but I'm trying to go with what I think a consensus is here and get something done.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, then we'll go on to the number 2. Anybody have a motion for the number 2?
I'm a little bit torn. We were asked if we know what happened in these other areas, and I don't, it would be highly inappropriate to just talk about rumors, but I will say what I heard, what I spoke to a colleague of mine in Sonoma County, what my understanding was, there was a survey that was put out, and they surveyed the current ambulance provider and the fire agencies. There are a lot of fire agencies in Sonoma County. All the fire agencies got together and provided one response, and the AMR, the ambulance company up there, provided multiple responses. They had all of their different levels of, from paramedic to EMT all the way up to their high executives submitted a response, and those responses were all correlated together, and the consensus was like 20 times what AMR wanted and 1 time what fire wanted. And to me that was it just felt a little shisty from hearing that version of the story. I wasn't there. I don't know if that's how accurate that was. And then the other thing I heard in San Bernardino was something along the lines of, there was something in the agreement where the Board of Supervisors was going to have the final decision, but in the fine print of the RFP or whatever the contract was, it was 100% based on points, and it took it out of the hands of the Board of Supervisors there who made the decision. Those were what I heard. Again, for what it's worth. Those were my concerns with that company.
And that was in regards to Endpoint?
Correct.
Okay. All right, do we have a motion on a number 2?
Well, can I just ask a question, I guess, about what's the process then after this? Are you going to
So the process after you select the vendors 1, 2, and 3, I'll go into contract and follow Solano County purchasing, and we'll try to get an estimate. I'll try to get an amount for October's meeting of the amount that they need to perform this RFP.
for each of the 3?
I'm going to start with the one. I guess we would go with all 3. I guess
If they can do it.
if they can do all 3, and then we can get prices for all 3. And then we would be able to bring that to the October meeting for you guys to select at that point to move forward.
Yeah, because I would like to see more information from all 3, not
And I
just
think they need more information from us too before they can kind of engage with, especially on amounts. But that would be the next step.
Yeah, just because for me, if we're going to end up sending this out to all 3 to get more information and actually get like pricing from them, I don't really have any strong feelings between Endpoint and Filler without kind of more information, honestly. Like I said, my only main concern with Filler is they just haven't completed an RFP, but they give us another proposal that's got like this great proposal and the cost is right and everything, then sure, I would end up going with them. It just kind of depends. So I don't have a specific second. I have a number 1 and then a 2 and a 2A and a 2B kind of. So if it doesn't make a difference in the next step, and then we're still going to pick a first, I don't really have a specific second or third.
I think we could go with that in terms of a 2A and a 2B, and in terms of your process, that works, correct?
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
so what would be your second then?
If we're going to get information from all 3, what does the ranking matter right now?
Trying to think. I mean, we can go into contract with the number 1 pick. I would just like to see the proposal and the amounts and be able to bring that back to you. Just because even if 1, 2, and 3, just like David said, they may on paper be the best, but then when you see the full amount and what they're going to engage, the prices and the timeline, it's actually just narrowing it down. When originally it was 5, I think going out for 5 different proposals was a lot for you to make a decision. But I think if we can narrow it down to 3, I actually really wanted to bring it down to 2 with Citygate jumping out. I think that's a little bit more, but because it was in the minutes, we're going to maintain that as a 3, picking the top 3.
So if that's the case, then I'm wondering if there's just consensus on what are the 3? We don't have to sort of force ourselves into a ranking right now based on lack of information.
Okay.
And then my experience with these processes is that typically how you do it. You just basically have to, then you go out and you get more details, and then you have a better sense of what each of these can bring to the table.
I agree.
Okay. So the other two, David, real quick, was endpoint and filler?
Can I take that as a motion? Okay. Oh, sorry.
And I apologize. I just wanted to answer your question, Greg. We're going to follow what is essentially an RFQ process, a request for quotes. So it's not just going to be the amount, but also the capacity to actually do what we're asking for in greater detail. So essentially, from what I'm understanding, your discussion being you really just have to figure out which one you don't want to include. You know, and if you agree with that, then we'll contact the other three.
Okay. So once again, I'll take that as a motion. We have a second.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion. We have a motion and a second on that. Do you, let's go ahead and have a vote. Basically, the motion is for endpoint and filler security strategies as the two additional firms that we would be evaluating. All right, then let's go ahead and have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. All right. And we will proceed with that. I have no comments this morning, further comments as chair. Does anybody have any comments from the directors group here? We're doing good. It's 10:25. All right. Thank you, everybody, for making it for the special meeting. I really appreciate it. Let's the process continue, and hopefully we'll have some luck here.
Yep.
All right. Thanks, everybody.